As soon as I read the account in our text today of Jesus' disciples who, upon seeing a man blind from birth, asked Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents? I marveled at how stubbornly persistent that sentiment is. That any misfortune we experience or that befalls the world must have been caused by some sinful folk. And no sooner had the medical experts and the political leaders began warning us about the quick spread of the coronavirus and advising drastic changes in how we live, work, and worship, that some religious folk came out of the woodwork and start blaming sin and blaming sinful folk for causing the disease. They didn't even have time to quarantine themselves before they start pointing fingers at who may have caused, whose sin could have possibly caused this disease. Now, we know our bodies, the earth, all of creation may at some point face natural, unexpected, destructive phenomena like disease, ruptures, and pandemics. And it bothered me that rather than opening their hearts and minds to see the ways that God may be revealing God's self during a most terrifying time, there are some whose imagination, whose theology could only lead them to pointing fingers. The only way they could see to respond was to attribute the spread of the virus to someone's sin. More precisely, that other person's sin. It is a response that doesn't seek the light of God in the midst of shadow, but rather seeks to ferret out the sinners to blame for the disaster. I know, I get it. There is a part of all of us that wants to grasp for simple theories of causality or simple theologies of divine consequences. And yes, it's true, like those disciples, sometimes we too want to know, what did he do that led to his blindness? Just the focus on whose sin created the man's condition misses how the man born blind came to Jesus' attention. Before any encounter with Jesus, before the man had any cause to know that there could even be healing, before he knew that a relationship with the Word made flesh was even a possibility, Jesus saw him first. Go back and read it. The man said nothing. The man offered nothing. The man didn't reach out. Jesus saw him. Jesus found him. The man born blind does not speak first, even though we later find out that he used to beg here. Here now, the man born blind does not beg Jesus for anything. The man born blind does not ask for recovery of sight. Sin or not, parent sin or whatever else, Jesus sees him. And the very presence of Jesus is enough to change everything. And I hope we notice how quickly Jesus even answered the disciples' question. Who sinned, Jesus? This man or his parents? And Jesus answers quickly and decisively to counter the mistaken theological assumption that sin caused this ailment. Jesus declared this man's condition is not the result of his sin or his parents' sin. And just in case they didn't quite get it, Jesus then demonstrates that the man's deliverance has nothing to do with what the man wanted or asked for. It has to do with God's grace. You see, there is no reason for anyone to expect that what Jesus does next would lead to the man born blind receiving his sight. It's a muddy, confusing act. It's a muddy miracle. You couldn't have predicted it. You couldn't have seen it. You couldn't have determined that he deserved it or that it was going to happen. But the man born blind heard Jesus' voice, followed Jesus' directions, and came back able to see. Let me tell you what he experienced. If you haven't quite got it yet, let me just say it clearly. The man born blind experienced amazing grace. Amazing grace. It is that amazing grace that comes in the very presence of God. He did not ask for it. He did nothing to get it. But before Jesus found the man born blind, Jesus had been going around telling anyone who would listen, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus, the light of the world, the very manifestation of the presence of God, bears witness to his own identity and saves, heals, and delivers. And this is where we start to see the parallels to our own day. In response to Jesus' demonstration of grace upon grace, of amazing grace, which is so transformative and so miraculous, unfortunately, the man's neighbors and the religious leaders go out of their way not to even see it. In light of this miraculous event, they go out of the way not to see it. They doubted that the miracle ever happened. They interrogated the man and his parents to prove that it couldn't have happened. They dismissed the healing because they didn't authorize it. They did not accept the man's testimony of deliverance because it didn't happen under their watch, or it didn't happen at the right time. It didn't happen when it should have. And in all of that doubting and interrogating and complaining and getting upset about it, they missed the moment of salvation. They missed the moment of salvation. They missed the moment. They failed to recognize what relationship and discipleship look like in the presence of the Word made flesh. Oh, I have so much pity for them. Because in the middle of their investigation and interrogation, they refused to behold what was happening before their very eyes. And they revealed in metaphorical sense, they revealed that they were the ones who truly had the problem seeing. They were the ones who could not see. There was a change in the man's identity. He is no longer a blind beggar. He is now a healed disciple. There was a change in the man's status. The man born blind moved from the darkness of unbelief into the light of the presence of God. There was a change in his perception of who Jesus is. Jesus is no longer the man called Jesus, but Jesus now is the Son of Man. And then the man born blind has to testify over and over and over again what happened to him. But this time, he doesn't sit on the side of the road shouting for alms. He has a new testimony. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. I hope that none of us sees this moment we're in as a demonstration of divine punishment for the sin of the world. I pray that our politics in our community do not devolve into a pursuit of scapegoats, but prompts us to pursue the light and life that Jesus brought into the world. I pray that our current social, political, and religious divide is not exacerbated through our appeal to fear and anxiety that creates more hatred and more division. I pray that for each of us personally, this becomes a moment in which we become more intentional about abiding in the presence of God, that we allow our testimonies of grace upon grace, and there have been many testimonies about grace upon grace, that we allow those testimonies that have filled our lives and gave us sight and insight into the saving presence of God increase our capacity to believe, increase our capacity to trust. Oh, Jesus sees what we're going through. And I hope that we know that the salvation we seek does not depend on our current status or how others perceive us. That there's no way that we can beg ourselves or holy ourselves or condemn ourselves into God's grace. So in this uncertain time and during this newly complicated season of Lent, God's movement in our midst may not arrive in the way that we hope or expect. It may not arrive in a clear, clanging gong. It may not arrive in the way that we think it ought to arrive. It may arrive all muddy and confusing. But by the grace upon grace that has been promised to us, the grace upon grace that comes because the fullness of Jesus makes it possible. Our journeys to faith and deliverance may not begin with an immediate recognition of who is the source of our salvation. We should not be too hard on ourselves. But perhaps it comes first by recognizing and celebrating what may seem to others as small deliverances or undeserved miracles. Perhaps it's about just telling the truth over and over again about the muddy, confusing, inexplicable breakthroughs in our lives to people who doubt our stories and who second guess our experiences. Perhaps it's about coming to recognize as we bear witness to our own salvation that it was the presence of God that had something to do with what happened to us when science and reason are unable to explain it all. Perhaps our real moment of belief comes when that song bubbles up, when we are going about our day, or when we are just trying to figure out how to get past this time of trial and tribulation, when that song bubbles up in our witness, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Coronavirus updates, anxious political leadership, governmental calls for shutdowns and social distancing, layoffs and economic hardships all testify to a dark time and an uncertain future. We don't deserve it, and there's nothing we've done to bring it on ourselves. And yet the light of the Word made flesh, the one who was with God from the beginning and is with us now, knows all about what we are experiencing, knows all about how we are feeling, experience it all right there with us. We are not alone. Whatever physical distances there may be, there is no distance from the light of the world. And so whatever is before us and whatever is in front of us, from his fullness, from the fullness of Jesus, we have all received grace upon grace. Accept that gift and sing Amazing Grace. Amen.